Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, May 2nd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Virginia, in which we saw a new race rating yesterday announced that Democrats are now the favorites in a state that was previously rated as toss-up by Larry Sabato's crystal ball at the University of Virginia. Now, the reason why I'm making a video talking specifically about one race is one, because there are very few elections this year, which means there are very few moments for Democrats and Republicans to show their electoral power and electoral capabilities in the day and age of a second Trump administration. On the second hand, Virginia is a good state that serves as a litmus test that generally leans towards the Democratic Party, voting for Kamala Harris by roughly 5 points, Biden by 10 in 2020, and Hillary Clinton by roughly 5 points as well in 2016, as a state that does seem to deviate between supporting Democrats and Republicans in very large amounts and in very small amounts. And another unique ability that Virginia provides is that very often, when there is an incumbent political party, Virginia serves to be the pushback against that party in the very early stages of their administration. If you remember back in 2021, we covered the Virginia gubernatorial race between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe. And that was a race that Democrats swore they would not lose. Republicans were very optimistic, but didn't expect Glenn Youngkin to win either, at least not until the final week of the campaign. And that's because during the entire duration of the campaign, Virginia was deemed unwinnable. Donald Trump had lost the state by 10 points, Terry McAuliffe had won this governor election before, and although he wasn't the incumbent, he had known how to win over Virginia once, and Democrats were convinced he could do it again. But Biden's approval was falling. Around the time of the Afghanistan withdrawal in August of 2021, that marked the convergence point in which Biden's approval rating went into the negative and never, ever recovered. And Virginia was the first stand for Republicans against against Joe Biden. And what we found was that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican nominee for governor, won by a margin of 1.9% in a state Biden had won a year prior by roughly 10 points. This was a 12-point swing, boiled down to Virginia, that coincided with an election in the state of New Jersey. Believe it or not, New Jersey swung by similar amounts, even a bit more than Virginia did, of roughly 13 points from the election 1 year prior. But Virginia isn't just an indicator in the last 4 years. 2017 was a very similar circumstance, where Ralph Northam, the former governor of Virginia and the last elected Democrat statewide, besides the midterms and presidential, or the last Democratic elected governor, he won his race by roughly 8 points across the state. 8.9%, really. This was a pretty substantive margin. Not as impressive as Biden's eventual 10-point margin 3 years down the line. But Hillary Clinton had just won this state by just around 5 points. Republicans invested a lot of time and resources and energy into Virginia. They believed that they might be able to overcome the anti-Trump sentiment that was very similar in tune and in terms of proportion of the public that disapproved of the job of the president to Biden in 2021. And Democrats used that to their advantage and used Virginia as a means of pushing back against Donald Trump. Well, this story writes itself again. In 2025, a very similar circumstance, but one that Republicans had hoped would be closer because they had a lieutenant governor running in this state. The difference in 2017 was that Ed Gillespie ran as the former RNC chair. He had not been elected statewide. He had not been in elected office on a notable level in Virginia, and voters didn't really know him. They were given very little time to characterize him and what he would accomplish and what he has done in his past with the Republican Party, and it wasn't enough, at least on the basis of experience, to justify a vote for him for governor. But Winsome Sears, the incumbent lieutenant governor, who won her election back in 2021, statewide, might I add, against a Democratic challenger, she has a record, one that arguably is popular to the extent that Glenn Youngkin was popular. No longer as much, but certainly held high levels of approval throughout the 4 years because of the work that Glenn Youngkin had done, and because it trickled down to benefiting the down ballot and notable Republicans in the state of Virginia. But this election she faces is largely insurmountable because of the conditions that she, Winsome Sears, has set up for herself, as well as the conditions that Donald Trump has set for the GOP this coming November. We're not the only people who are noticing that the numbers are getting worse for Donald Trump nationally. His approval rating is getting worse. And on the issues that matter a lot to voters, it's getting far worse than it does on the national level on broad strokes basis. On the issue of the economy, Donald Trump's approval rating is negative 13.5%. On the issue of inflation, it is negative 21.1%. Yes, you heard that correctly. And Donald Trump's net approval, which withstood the test of time with its honeymoon lasting just shy of about a month and a half, is at a point where the spread is -7 nationwide and lowering, as well as the Democratic Party's advantage over the GOP in the generic ballot is growing. The move here is one that also is noteworthy, because of all the places that would know Virginia best, look no further than a premier political institution founded at the University of Virginia, who in 2017 accurately predicted that Democrats would win the governorship and make this race lean for the Democrats, accurately predicted that back in 2021, the only place to call it for Glenn Youngkin, it would go to the Republican Party. And even if you look further back, was one of the few places that accurately predicted that Democrats would win the governorship in 2013. And now, what do they say? Well, let's take a look. The predictions are in line with that of the Cook Political Report and Inside Elections, in that Democrats are expected to win this race and flip it from the GOP. The numbers here also look a lot better for Democrats than they did 4 years ago. A flashback to 4 years ago will find that Glenn Youngkin was leading in the polls by 1.7% on Election Day. He ended up winning by 1.9%. The polls in Virginia actually ended up being remarkably accurate, and we saw notable changes in support that had started out as much more in favor of Terry McAuliffe. I mean, you can even see it here, that Republicans were probably going to lose the governorship. But by the time we reached November, and by the time Biden's approval rating had time to fall, some of these earlier polls were taken around the time that Biden was up in the net positive. Net positive nationwide. It sounds crazy to think about, but it's reality. The numbers like you see from Christopher Newport University that had McAuliffe up by 9. But then right before the election, his lead reduced to 1. And in that final stretch, it flipped in favor of Glenn Youngkin. Emerson College is also a great example. McAuliffe led in their first set of polls in this state by roughly 4 points. By the time we reached Election Day, their last poll had indicated a tie. But that was actually taken about a week and a half before the election, and then it ended up skewing in favor of the GOP. 2021 numbers here. 2025 numbers look a lot better for the Democratic Party. And so I do think that they are right in making this distinction. But it speaks to the fact that maybe it wouldn't have looked like this, and actually did not look like this earlier on in this administration. The pushback against Trump is becoming that of what we saw in 2017, and arguably even of Biden in 2021. What we learned from the first Trump administration is that Donald Trump's approval rating, much like Biden's, never, ever recovers. He starts off with a honeymoon period that seems like it was a lifetime ago, because to average voters, it was a lifetime ago. And you can see that from that point onward, negative, 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 and it stayed that way. And while it isn't as bad today, it was -9, roughly 8 years ago today. Today it's -7, so, about 2 points off. It never, ever recovered. And so that matters. When you take a look at the results of 2017 and 2021, and you look to see who was calling it right and why were these conditions so favorable to the party that won them, you start to find yourself in really writing in a very, very solid confirmation, solid prediction the Democrats are set to win this governor election. It would be an upset, arguably, of massive proportions for Republicans to win this race. even though they have a statewide elected official and arguably a more electable Republican than Amanda Chase, who wanted this governor's race as well. She's far more extreme than Winsome Sears and is presented that way. Winsome Sears is the lieutenant governor who had been someone people had voted for before. There can be more of a case to be made. But given everything that's happening with the federal government layoffs, with the scandals and traps that Winsome Sears is falling into on hot mic or on overall just the way the campaign is run, you'll also find, too, that just the national environment is not conducive to Republican victories, especially in a state that Harris won, Biden won, Clinton won, Obama won twice. In a day and age where Trump won all the swing states in 2024, he didn't move Virginia by enough. Moved Virginia by maybe 5 points. Maybe 5 points. But it speaks to the fact that there was no VP candidate on the ticket like there was in 16. That resulted in a near identical margin in 16 for Clinton than to Harris, which means that Harris was stronger this time around and arguably Trump was weaker. And Republicans in general were weaker. And I think that's what you're going to see happen this time around. That there might have been this hype and this wild anticipation that Republicans might do better. They're not doing better. Democrats are going to win this race, and the numbers show it. And now the most accurate predictors of elections, specifically in Virginia, are also saying it too. Not to say Republicans should be giving it up. Definitely want to watch New Jersey. Definitely want to watch Virginia. I think Democrats will take away both at the end of the evening come November of this year. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. And check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.